Hello and welcome to the White Witch podcast with me, Carly. Hope you are all well, witches. On today's episode, I am joined by the wonderful Sarah Robinson, who you may know from her wonderful witchy books, Kitchen Witch and Yoga for Witches. She is, in fact, one of my favourite authors and witches in the witchy community here in the UK. So, our book review today is Kitchen Witch, Food, Folklore and Fairy Tale by Sarah. Now, I read this book a little while back, but I wanted to save it for when I mustered up the courage to invite Sarah onto the show. Had to gear myself up for it. I sometimes get quite nervous, if I'm honest, when I'm interviewing someone for the podcast. How I love this book. Here is the book's blurb. Welcome to a place of great magic, the kitchen. Within this book, you'll find no recipes, but something cooked up just for you. You'll find stories of magic, healing and hearth, of feasts and fasts and fairy tales, of poisoned apples, bewitching gingerbreads, and seeing the future in a teacup. Magic, superstition, cooking, and food rituals have been intertwined since the beginning of humankind. This book is an exploration of the history and culture of food, folklore, and magic, and those skilled in healing and nourishing, herbalists, wise women, cooks, cunning folk, and the name many of them would come to bear, witch. Kitchen Witch is an invitation to see the magic in every corner of your kitchen, to remember the superstitions about fairies who like butter, to watch the fruits of each season ripen, to see the healing potential in herbs and plants. With the Kitchen Witch as our guide, we'll explore food, nature, magic, and transformation. We'll discover what the name of Kitchen Witch could mean to us in modern interpretations of ancient practices. May this book of stories and ideas show that there's magic in the mundane, witchcraft within your walls, and the goddess really is in the details. If you consider yourself a kitchen witch, you will adore this book, but I think most witches will. It's such a wonderful compendium of all things kitchen related. This book contains information on the history of the Kitchen Witch, the cauldron, household gods and spirits, food in folklore and fairy tale, food magic, food medicine, herbalism, spice magic, food in ritual and celebration, and food in the Sabbaths. My favourite bits had to be all the research relating to fairy tales and folklore, but also the section on alewives, which is a fascinating topic. We actually covered this over in the Witches Institute on Patreon. The alewives were very much the reason of why witches are depicted with their broom, hats, and cats. I also adored the section on beer goddesses. These two parts of the book really surprised me at how the production of beer and ales started out being so female-led. In the fairy tales of the book, we hear all about Baba Yaga, Hansel and Gretel, a Russian fairy tale called The Silver Saucer and the Red Apple, The Princess and the Pea, Rapunzel, one of my favourites called A Pancake Fairy Tale, which is based on a story called A Witch Burnt, originating from the Netherlands, The Fairy Queen's Wisdom, and many more. And of course, they all relate to food in some form. I love all the pictures that are peppered throughout this book. The cover is absolutely gorgeous. Again, another cottagecore witchy type imagery that runs throughout the book. Sarah has managed to create a kitchen witchery book that is more than just spells and recipes. There actually aren't any recipes in this book, and I didn't realize that until I read the blurb. There was so much else in there. She outlines the sacred origins of cooking. And in my opinion, this is one of those books that goes a long way in ensuring that lots of wonderful old information and lore is kept alive to stand the test of time. No stone is really left unturned in this book, and you can see that there is a huge passion and love for this subject in Sarah's writing. I mentioned last week how Julia's book is a book that now lives permanently on my altar, but I also have a kitchen altar, and I have decided that this book really should live on there for when I work through the wheel of the year, as each Sabbath is looked in the second section of the book. If you've ever listened to any of Sarah's amazing meditations on Insight Timer or YouTube, you'll know that she has a very whimsical, beautiful way of retelling stories, which she does perfectly throughout the book. Her factual writing, though, is superb too. There are lots of good references to sources in this book. I can tell she really, really went deep on research for this. And I say that as someone who has researched and tried to look at a lot of the same topics in relation to kitchen witchery for my own writing and for the podcast. This book turned up a lot of areas that I haven't really been able to uncover anywhere else. And I've used a lot of this information for different things we've looked at on the podcast, but also on Patreon for any sort of content relating to kitchen, witchcraft, and, halfcraft. Talking about this book after having a gap in reading it, it definitely makes me want to reread it. I'm not shy in saying this. This is the best book that I've ever read on kitchen witchery. I cannot recommend this enough. I referenced the alewives and beer goddesses. I've also covered other areas of kitchen witchery on Patreon. So if you would like to join us in Patreon, it's just £6 per month to access grimoire sheets for episodes of the White Witch podcast. We have a folklore, witching history, or ghost story that we tell each month. There's a Patreon podcast, 4 hedge witch studies a month looking at a tree, crystal, power animal, or a plant. We have a monthly gathering or workshop. And you can also read along with us if you choose in the Literary Witches Coven, our book club, where we read a fiction or non-fiction book. If you sign up for Patreon, you're also supporting me in keeping the podcast alive and any work that I do going forward, because let's be honest, podcast hosting pays literally nothing. So if you do sign up, honestly, I hope that all the content will really help you in your craft. But it is a huge part of what keeps me being able to do this. There's literally no way I could survive podcasting alone. But yes, I hope if you do sign up, I'm really confident that there is a ton of content that you can access and use. And of course, you can also cancel Patreon at any time. It's really simple to do. I'll put a link in the show notes for Patreon. So I'm more than excited to say, join me after the break to talk with Sarah Robinson, the author of Kitchen Witch and Yoga for Witches. Welcome back. I am here with the wonderful Sarah Robinson, author and yoga teacher based in Bath in the UK. Sarah is fascinated by folk magic and fairy tales.
her books Kitchen Witch, which we've reviewed on the podcast today. I absolutely love it. And the upcoming Kitchen Witch Companion that's going to be released later on this year, explore the history of food, magic, and the power of story. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It is an honour to be part of the White Witch community.
I was just saying to you, obviously before we picked up on the, coming onto the podcast episode, it's so lovely to hear your voice, and it's so also strange because I listen to your meditations and your stories all the time, and it'd be to send me off into dreamland. It's just really kind of nice to hear you on the podcast. It's very strange. It's very different for me, but lovely.
Well, thank you. It's lovely that you've joined me on many other things, but I have my kind of meditation calm voice, and then this is kind of just my normal drinking coffee in the morning voice, but it's always fun to connect.
Absolutely. No, I can relate. So starting off with one of the most important questions, how and when did you come to the craft?
It's a good one. I was kind of thinking about it, as I said to Carly before we started recording. I love it when podcasts send me the questions beforehand, because I just get a chance to kind of ruminate on these questions. But really, the craft has been part of my life in different forms since I was pretty small. So I was 7 when I started going to this pagan kids club in Portsmouth, in the place I was born. And I went to lots of folk events. A lot of my family are from the West Country, so folk events are just what we do here in the West Country.
Yeah.
We're always wassailing apple trees and kind of having folk festivals and things. So it was kind of just really part of my upbringing, this kind of humming background of folk magic, and just kind of a whisper of the old ways was kind of there. Not that I realized it at the time when I was growing up, but it was kind of just always kind of present. And now it's become more my passion, I suppose. My passion in writing. There's a real element of kind of remembering or re-remembering past things that I've done and my family and kind of ancestors, and uncovering the history and magic of the West Country that is now my home. And it's kind of where all my family are from, so I can kind of consider it more my home. So the pathway's been long and winding, but but the craft's been there kind of hovering in the background the whole time, which has been very lovely.
I know what you mean about the West Country. My grandma and all her family, all from like Bristol and around that area. And it's just so, it just, there were always things that they always said and, came up, would sort of refer to. And it wasn't until I was older, I was like, oh, that's very witchy. So yeah, I know what you mean. But yeah, particularly where you are. No, I love this, and it's funny because obviously most of the witches that we do have on the podcast, a lot will say the same. It started really early, but we haven't always realised it's it's there. Same for me, absolutely same for me. So, sorry.
Sorry. I was just going to say, it's quite nice. A lot of it, it's nice to come to it when you're a kid because you're not particularly fussed about particular rules or anything. You're just kind of, you're just in it and you're just enjoying it, and that's a really nice way to come to it, I think. So.
Absolutely. I feel like I should have had a clue with like my upbringing when my mum had about I kid you not, 3 million green men statues like around the garden and the house. I'm like, what part of this like did you not realise? Like, how did you not realise there was something going on here?
I love it. It's so, I mean, it's very here in the West Country as well. I literally have 3 in my garden, and it's just, maybe it's part of being an adult. You need to have a garden and a few green men floating around, just kind of watch over things.
Yeah, absolutely. So really excited to talk about this book with you. We reviewed your book Kitchen Witch at the beginning of this episode today. So could you please give us some insight into kitchen witchery that you love and bits that you apply within your own craft?
Thank you for reviewing the book. That's lovely. I really appreciate it. My favourite kitchen witchery is, like all my favourite things, just very simple. That's how I roll. So every morning I'll crush a cardamom pod into my coffee, and whenever I'm baking cookies I sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon in, and it's just a lovely thing to add these little magical and kind of mindful flourishes to my time in the kitchen. And the same goes for the stories as well, and the kind of the myths, just knowing those stories and kind of revisiting them is quite a simple thing, but it just brings this extra layer of kind of magic, an extra kind of hand on your shoulder when you're in the kitchen, which I think is lovely. So, you know, simplicity. I'm all about simplicity when it comes to magic in the kitchen.
Oh, absolutely. No, I absolutely feel you on that as well. I'm very unlike to get into the kind of big high magic and ritual in all aspects, kitchen witchery and, you know, just general kind of, I don't know, ritual anyway, and everyday things. And I'm very much like the little things, and that kind of keeps me consistent and able to, you know, connect with my craft. So I very much get that. I'm going to try the cardamom pod in my coffee though. That's definitely something I'm going to have to try.
It's a little chef's kiss here. It's gorgeous. I love it. I'm a real cardamom fan. So and in baking as well, it's really lovely. So if anyone wants to try that, you know,
I'll give it
my blessing.
You touched on that just then, and one of my favorite aspects of your work is how you retell folklore and fairy tales throughout this book and your meditation, just lots of the work that I've read of yours. I consistently listen to you on the app Insight Timer, as I've said. So what were some of your favorite folklore and fairy tale finds when it came to researching and writing Kitchen Witch?
It's a good question. So thank you so much for joining me on Insight Timer. I love it as a platform, and it's a real great way of me to kind of just when I've got a little story I want to share, it's like, this is perfect. I've told quite a few of my favourite
fairy. What Insight Timer is, shouldn't I? Because some of our listeners might have not been on it, but it's a wonderful meditation. It's got all manner of things on there, but it's, you know, you've got a free and a sort of paid for. So I've used both sides of the app, but there are just thousands of wonderful meditations on there, and you've got some great ones, haven't you? Like, you've got stories and goddess journeys, and you've got different Sabbath ones, and I mean, there's so many witchy ones on there that are wonderful. Sorry, Sarah, just to cut you in there, but I was just going to say, some of our listeners might not have listened to it, and you're right, it's a really good platform, and you've done some great work on there.
Absolutely. Insight Time is a lovely free app, and there are hundreds of free meditations on there for any theme you're looking for, you know, new moon, zodiac, goddesses, witchcraft, you know, just anything you're looking for, you can find it there on the Insight Timer app. So it's beautiful. And then there are kind of more involved courses and things that you can do. So yeah, if anyone isn't familiar with the Insight Timer app, it is a lovely platform. And I personally have loved being able to share some of the fairy stories and folk tales that I found. And actually a few of them that kind of didn't make it into Kitchen Witch. So there's one I was particularly fond of on the app. I read it. It's called Sweet Fortune. And it's drawn from the old Italian fairy tale, where there's this very unlucky girl, and she hunts out this kind of raggedy, cantankerous old witch woman who is the embodiment of her luck. And this woman's, you know, furious and angry, and the girl forcibly sort of scrubs her up, puts her in a lovely dress, and feeds her sweet cake, and this kind of sweetens her fortune, and she has better luck after that. And it's just such a fabulous tale of kind of literally seizing your own destiny, and the power of cake as well. So, you know, what a good sweet cake can do, and then how those little kind of magical elements weave together, which is really part of how I love journeying through researching the book. You know, we see the power of cake in a fairy tale such as Sweet Fortune, and then we see in, you know, the ancient Greek myths how Psyche offered up a honey cake to Cerberus to gain access to the underworld. And then in history, cakes were used as offerings as deities, for deities, because they were these, you know, treasured and high value food. So that kind of seeing, you know, cakes, I mean, you know, you could pick any food stuff, but cake is obviously particularly appealing, but you can see how cake features in all these different elements of fairy tale, folk tale, history, and how valued it was within that. So it's great fun to kind of follow the cakes and ale through the stories.
Oh, I love this. It's so true as well, because well, I don't feel so bad now for cake being a very prime part of my life. But I was going to say, I also you just mentioned about that. I loved the sections in your book, lots of them, obviously, but the real eye-opening bits for me that I had struggled to find quite information on in any other books really were the alewives and the beer goddesses. That was really fascinating for me. I had no idea how predominant it was a female industry, how we had like the depiction of the depiction of the witch as well, like how we, where we get the idea of us with the cat and the broom and the hat, and anyone who hasn't read this book needs to read that section because it was so fascinating. And yeah, I know the reason I love this book is because there is so much information in there that I haven't found in any other kitchen, because I do love a kitchen witch book, but I haven't found any other kitchen witch book. It goes really deep, but then it's like peppered throughout with all these lovely tales, and I'm a folklore fairy tale lover anyway, so I just love how it's all woven together, and it's just beautiful.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to kind of explore kitchen witchery in a different sort of way, I think, for me, because there are lots of gorgeous kind of kitchen witch recipe books out there, but I really wanted to dive into the history of kind of how we in the past have really treasured and valued food as something very sacred. And obviously the kind of the beer goddesses kind of touch on that. Kind of any food stuff has kind of this interesting rich history, but especially things like like cakes and ale again. So it's beautiful to follow that through, and the kind of how it kind of all began with women stirring pots and cauldrons, whether it was it was beer or soups or healing tinctures of herbs. So it was beautiful to go back to the beginning and kind of follow the threads through to this kind of modern idea of what we call the kitchen witch. So that the name is quite modern, but the rich history of food magic is manifold and gorgeous, and it's lovely to kind of wander through just a little bit. I just touched on just the briefest of magical moments and kind of my favorite bits, but it was just such a vast area. It was really lovely to bring some of those stories forward, like you say, the alewives and some of the wonderful beer goddesses, Ninkasi, and the wave maidens of Norse mythology. It's beautiful to bring that up, because I think these are stories that a lot of people haven't heard, or are not quite as well known as some of the other. I know what you mean. Even just, I'm just thinking, beer. We just equate it with men now, don't we? And it's just so funny, because it's kind of back once upon a time it was all women. They were doing, because it was just part of the half craft and part of being in the kitchen. So all these things that started with women, some things got taken over, a lot of things got taken over, but knowledge is key to claiming it back, I think. So it's lovely to share those stories and just remind ourselves that it started with a woman and a cauldron and a black cat, and it can come back there too. So
absolutely. And isn't it wonderful? I think the book showcases how, give us the cauldron, give us, I don't know, like just the basics. And women throughout history, we've always managed to, men have definitely had, I'm not trying to kind of, but in the book it shows you like what we've created, and obviously with the alewives side of things, you see how like the patriarchy steps in and takes over, and you're right, I had no idea how it was predominantly started and run by women, and all the medicinal side of it, with like how their herb knowledge went into that ale, and there was it was just fascinating. And I just had no idea of how much it really kind of started out, the witch hunts and all of that side of things, and how it was taken over and so heavily kind of monetized thereon by the patriarchy and so on. But yeah, it was just so insightful. I learned a lot from this book. So you are a woman of many talents. And And I'm really excited because you've just released, haven't you, your new book, Enchanted Journeys. Well done, congratulations.
Thank you.
Features some of the meditation journeys that you have on Insight Timer and YouTube and so on, from the many meditations that you've created over the last, I read that it was over the last 10 years, which is, amazing. So what is as someone that could use some tips, what is your personal meditation practice like, as somebody who, obviously you do a lot of work in this field, I know you are a yoga teacher and so on. Do you have any tips or insight that you could give us witches, perhaps in regards to how you see the importance of meditation practice, its benefits and so on?
Yeah, so thank you for sharing Enchanted Journeys. I mean, obviously, I've made no secret of the fact through my other books that I feel that meditation and things like yoga can be a beautiful supportive tool for our magic work. And so Enchanted Journeys that came out at the beginning of this month, I think, it's a resource of meditation scripts. And, in it, I talk about how meditation is such a powerful tool, and we kind of see it through just all cultures have something like yogic meditation, prayer, contemplative practices, shamanic work, Zen and Buddhist practices. So it's kind of every culture has this way of seeking connection, and which is beautiful. But also sometimes I think we feel that we can get bogged down in kind of the right and the wrong way to meditate, or think that there is a right and a wrong way. And I would certainly say, as kind of a tip, for your personal practice, like outside of kind of specific religions, you can absolutely make it unique to you. So it's a good idea sometimes just to let go of what you think meditation should be, sat on your little meditation pillow, you're in lotus position, you've got your mala beads, you're looking very calm, very Instagram worthy, and it's a good idea to just let all of that go. And often my meditation practice is, first thing in the morning, I'll just sit up in bed, maybe I've got a coffee in my hands, and I'll just take a moment to breathe, to maybe kind of notice the sensations around me. I also love walking meditation, so through my local woodlands and fields and things, or just whatever, a small patch of grass, a garden, a balcony. It's all part of that mindful focus of meditation, and fantastic for anyone who ever feels kind of stressed or overwhelmed, which is a lot of us.
Yeah.
The world is overwhelming at the moment. Yeah, exploring how you can make it work for you and letting go of what you think it should be, I think is a really good way to make meditation a tool that works for you, and not just something that you kind of feel that you have to do in a certain way. I think that's always useful to remember.
Absolutely. And again, it's coming back to that keeping it simple, isn't it, and tailoring it to how it's going to work for you. And I think sometimes, even myself included, you're very right, it's like we have that whole aesthetic and idea in our minds, and it puts us off sitting down for a couple of minutes and just having some time to be mindful, or like you say, just the concept of just going out on a walk and doing it. So I feel, so when I actually do keep on top of my, that's me putting too much pressure on myself, but like you, I've kind of gone from sitting in front of my altar with 3 million candles burning and in the lotus position, really, really struggling, forcing myself to now sitting up in bed and just listening to some nice calming sort of meditation music, and just being a bit more calmer and nicer to myself. And hearing you say that as somebody that works and does this within the work you do, it's kind of made me think, you're doing all right. You
are doing all right. That is absolutely it. Right. Yeah. You're doing all right, my love.
I need to hear that from you today. So talking on meditations, and actually just some of the work, within this book and different aspects of your work that I've seen, a lot of your work has reference to the goddesses. So I particularly love the meditations you have for the Morrigan and Hecate. I work with both of them, so I have listened to those frequently. But do you have any deities that perhaps you work or align with as a result of the research that you've carried out within your work? And I don't know, if so, how do you like to work with them?
I think on the journey of Kitchen Witch, one of the kind of little histories that really spoke to me was the ancient Greek practice of Hecate's supper. I thought that was so lovely, and I was really taken in when I kind of read this. I was like, God, this is beautiful. And I loved the, for those of you who haven't read the book, in ancient Greece, at the end of every lunar month, there would be sort of a 3-day period where the household would have a big kind of clean away, a big tidy up, and then offerings would be placed to Hecate with sort of a chance to kind of let go or offer up anything to seek forgiveness for. So if you feel that you'd wronged Hecate or the goddesses in any way, this was a chance to sort of to offer your apologies. So kind of a cleaning away, a setting up of an altar, and then kind of stepping into the new month afresh. And I thought that was such a beautiful way to honor the lunar month. So certainly that story really spoke to me, and I'm always quite fond of kind of following the lunar cycles. And it was lovely to read that story, because I think we still do follow the moon and lunar cycles, or those of us kind of walking that path do. So finding ways that our ancestors once did something very similar is lovely. And the practice of Hecate supper is a really lovely one that I know some people really enjoy. So that one was that one just kind of leapt out of me as one that I really loved, and kind of just stuck with me, I suppose.
And it kind of intertwines that like kitchen witchery, the house witchery side of it, and some lunar magic in there. It's got all the little elements, and I love that. Yeah, I agree. I think, and it's wonderful, isn't it? Because if you kind of work with the moon, and you do sort of integrate that into perhaps any sort of house witchy things or kitchen witchy things, you've almost got that reset every month. And I always love those bits about the craft. It's like a little fresh slate, and applying it to different areas that really do affect us, our physical environment, the food we eat. If we can do anything with those, it has such a effect on us spiritually. And I'm very much a fan of kitchen witchery and house witchery, because of the direct benefits that it has on us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we're looking at these kind of much older practices, these ancient practices, we see so much more that just work with magic, work with deities was very much, it was just day-to-day life. It was almost mundane, it was just part of life. And that is lovely, but also kind of in a way sad that many of us have lost that kind of idea that magic is simply part of day-to-day life, and it doesn't have to be super elaborate. It can just be part of our days, which is lovely. And it's useful to be reminded of that once it was just so simple, it was just part of life, and it was just part of as easy and as mundane as kind of tidying the floors and lighting a few candles. So it was nice to journey through that.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what I was trying to say. Like, you're right. I think it's just now, as I've kind of the longer I suppose, the more I've been sort of working on my craft, I feel like I'm working less on it, if that makes sense, because I'm just doing things. So I guess the aspects for me, and you probably can relate with your work, is I'll kind of have kitchen witch practice, house witch practices, because and also elements within mindfulness that kind of relate to, and I'm going to kind of get into this as well, like exercise and so on, just little witchy things that I do that just purely apply to my everyday life now, whereas before I was very much like, get all the candles out, high magic, I was like get my black cloak on, cast my huge circle, and years ago that was kind of very much me. And now I'm just like, it's all very simple, and it just fits into everyday stuff. It goes under the radar. It's just very small magic, but just consistent and works for me. So yes.
Beautiful. Yeah,
so
perfect.
That was kind of what I was going to get into, another aspect of this, because I know another element of your work is as a yoga teacher, and we did review Yoga for Witches on the podcast before. Love that book. One discovery, and you really kind of went into this in the book, but I did want to ask you on this. I've made exercise a huge part of my life in recent months, and really find it benefits and enhances my spiritual and like witchy practice in huge ways. It's affected and helped everything really. But can you talk to us from your perspective of the sort of spiritual and physical benefits of your yoga practice, and, you know, when you're teaching people and so on, how it weaves into and perhaps maybe benefits your craft and spirituality?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, to put it under a big umbrella, I suppose the practices of yoga and meditation are all about finding kind of a certain stillness and focus, which is just, it's invaluable to our magical practice, whatever that may be for us. And, you know, movement of physical yoga asana can prepare us for ritual, but it can also be part of it as well. So salutations to the sun or the moon, and the same for meditation. It can be kind of preparation for something else. So a ritual of manifestation, for example, or it can be the ritual itself. So it's that kind of weaving it all together was part of my intention for Yoga for Witches, and a kind of a union of kind of my heritage from the West with this practice of the East, and kind of how they can support each other, whatever it is we're doing. So finding a sense of kind of focus and stillness, whether we are moving through yoga movements, whether we're kind of lifting heavy weights, whether we're, you know, running, it's kind of, it can be beautiful to bring just a little bit of that sense of stillness, strength, grounding. So they can be woven together so beautifully. It was such a I made an attempt to summarize that magic in Yoga for Witches. Sometimes I worry, I look back like, did I do it well enough? I don't know. But
no, you did. It's quite a simple question. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I'm asking you that question because I really appreciate your take on it, because I don't know about you, and actually I know you've always been, you know, you're a, you know, physical person, you're doing, you know, been doing the yoga and so on. And I'm waffling now, but what I was trying to say is, I think sometimes one of the reasons I really kind of came to exercise, and what I'm trying to sort of express, I guess, to our listeners, is I find that with my witchy practice, sometimes you can get so stuck in your mind and the physical aspect. I used to never kind of contemplate how that would really benefit my practice. I was so stuck in my mind and books and journeying and meditating. I was kind of detached from my body, and coming into your body and, like you say, like working through these movements and connecting the mindfulness, and, you know, they really do like just bring you all together, I think, in body and mind. And I just think when you're not doing it, and I really feel like a nag, like I'm sort of like, yeah, just get out there, go for a walk. But I just think it was such a game changer for me, and so like, wow, it's all kind of come together, and I feel like I'm on this different like buzzy vibration as a result of sort of balancing or trying to balance out the two.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, physically bringing your body into your practice. I mean, you know, once you're there doing it, I suppose it sounds so obvious, but yes, it's bringing your whole self, your mind, your heart, your spirit, and your physical body to this as ritual, in ritual. So yeah, fantastic. So that's beautiful. That's great.
And you kind of find, because I used to do yoga quite a way back, I'm not very good at it, so I wobble about, but I do, you know, I couldn't do it. But you find yourself, and I do this when I've sort of got like huge weights in my arms and I'm about to lift them up, just contemplating my life choices. You just have these thoughts, and it's like usually like, why am I trying to lift this stupidly heavy weight? But you know, when you're in a yoga position or in the midst of you know, doing like lifting a weight or whatever exercise you are doing, there's so many kind of ideas and things that I find flow through, or sometimes I just sit there zoning out like a zombie because I'm just, you know, so like in that sort of flow, you know. But it's just really I just feel like, you know, if like you know, a lot of us do really get stuck in our mind, and I just really feel like if you can kind of do a little bit of activity or anything, it just really does change things for you, I think. But I'm going to stop waxing lyrical about exercise. It's just been it's been a huge change for me. I'd love to hear, because I did touch on it at the beginning of the podcast episode, about your new book. So can you give us some insights into your new book, when that's coming out, but also any other projects that you might be working on currently that we should look out for?
Yes. So the next book, the next book now that's coming out after Enchanted Journeys is, drum roll, The Kitchen Witch Companion. So it's a second Kitchen Witch book because there was so much magic we couldn't fit it into one book.
Oh, this is exciting.
It's super exciting, and so the Kitchen Witch Companion is coming out in autumn this year, and it is a collaboration with me and the wonderful Lucy H. Pierce. So I am totally honoured. I know.
That's so exciting. I was not expecting that. That's wonderful. I love her work. That is really, yeah, you two are that's the powerhouse of two authors right there. That's exciting.
We are excited and it's me and Lucy, but it's also a lot of other voices as well. So we've really reached out into the community and got stories of recipes, of herbs, of healing from other people, and we've kind of collated it all together in a very rich book of recipes, of stories, of reflections. So it's going to be pretty special. You know how I love the Kitchen Witch, so I'm very excited about that.
I can hear the passion in your voice when you're talking about what's in it. Like I can feel that, like the passion in that. Definitely, that's so exciting. I love that, and I'll definitely be looking out for that one. But yeah, that sounds like a real powerhouse of. And I think, I'm really excited to read more. I wasn't sure because I had heard the title, but I'm excited to hear that it's going to be more kitchen witchery.
Yeah, I mean, I told you before we started recording that I try not to have favourites with my books, but I've got to say there's something about the Kitchen Witch that just, there's a sumptuousness to it that I find utterly enchanting. So I'm very, very excited. I'm very overexcited, but that's fine. It's okay to be overexcited, I think.
And actually I spoke to quite a few of my other witchy patrons and witchy friends and so on, and they've also been waxing lyrical about this book. So yeah, we are all excited to receive this, Sarah. Thank you. So we've touched on obviously ritual and so on for you, but I always like to ask people on the podcast, what music do you integrate perhaps when you are writing or into any ritual work that you're doing that you feel is particularly magical and so on?
So for when I'm writing, I don't know if this is going to sound very, very dull, but what I love when I'm writing is the kind of those ambient soundscapes on YouTube, like the crackling fires and the kind of the woodland brooks and things. So I love those. I love them. I don't know if it's a female thing or just the people I hang out with. It's probably just the people I hang out with, but we love them. So if I'm getting into the vibe of sort of like an ancient medieval tavern with a crackling fire and steaming brews, I can just find it on YouTube and then I've got it in the background and I'm feeling it. And so I really do love them, and I think they're just beautiful. They're very calming. And they just help me kind of get into the vibe a little bit, and obviously they're kind of very gentle background noise. It's not kind of too distracting if I'm reading through and editing and doing all that kind of dull intense work for kind of the editing process. Not dull, that's not the right word, I take that back.
No.
It's
Have you seen the one with the cat in the witch's kitchen? Because I was thinking, I bet you would love that one. It's like a nighttime one and a daytime one of the cat in the kitchen and all the witchy bits around it. And I that's like my regular one, but I know what you mean. They're so beautiful and they're just so comforting in the background. So I also listen to those. Yeah.
I've seen kind of an uptick of the kind of the witchy themed ones. I think there's a real kind of, people are loving the kind of the witch's kitchen, the witch's garden. I think there's people are really enjoying those at the moment. So I've definitely seen more of them around, and anything with a cat in, I'm down with that. So
absolutely. I love it. So obviously, Sarah, I'll put all the links into the show notes for where you can find Sarah, because you're on Instagram at Yoga for Witches, aren't you? And your website is sentiayoga.com. But I will put everything into the show notes so everybody can find you. Please, like, you've got to listen to Sarah's meditations and stories. They are so adorable. They're just so comforting and lovely. Sarah, thank you so much for coming onto the show. You have no idea how honoured. I've wanted you to come on for so long, and I've been bracing myself, gearing myself up to have you on, because it's kind of, you know, something I was a little bit nervous about. You know, if you kind of, I've read all your stuff, listened to, you know, your meditations. I've wanted you to come on for a long time. I feel so honoured that you did. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. It's been an honour to be a little part of the podcast, and I'm a big fan of the White Witch podcast. So I mean, it's a real honour to be part of it.